Hello, my name is Scott Coates and I'm a science and engineering teacher at Tolt Middle School in Carnation, Washington. And today I'm going to talk to you about guitar hacks. And I'm calling this one the ultimate guitar hack. It's not a guitar at all. And in this video I'll show you how you can build a cigar box ukulele for less than $20 that sounds nice and looks good. So there's a rich history of folk instruments in the United States, and you can go back as far as the 1830s and find examples of people making musical instruments out of basically discarded boxes. There's a rich history of making guitars, chordophones, and stringed instruments out of cigar boxes that has gained popularity recently. So here's one made out of a brick house cigar case. I don't smoke, but I love cigar boxes. Here's an actual Cuban cigar box. Cuban cigars aren't legal in America, but we can bring the boxes in. Here's a resonator chordophone that I made out of an old angel food cake pan and an old cigar box. And this is what we're going to actually be building with the kids. It's a box that's bought from a craft store, lumber from the lumber yard, some 3D printed parts, and pretty much the most expensive part is the tuning heads. So let's get to it. Here are the supplies that you'll need to make a cigar box ukulele. First is an 8-inch craft box. I get these from Michael's. This costs about $4. The neck of the ukulele is made out of poplar that's 1/2 by 1.5 inches. I get this from local hardware store. A piece this long costs about $2. The fretboard is made out of 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch oak. This piece is about 9.5 inches long. Also costs about $1. And there's a spacer that goes in between the neck and the fretboard that's also made out of poplar. It's 1/4 by 1.5 by about 8.5 inches long. This costs about 50 cents. The tuners, set of tuners, I get these from cbgiddy.com, which is a website that caters to cigar box enthusiasts. A set of 4 tuners costs about $6. The tailpiece that holds the strings in place is made out of 5/8 by 2 inch oak doweling. One piece of doweling that's 36 inches long costs about $4. So these are practically free. You need a couple of bolts that are 1/8 by 1.25 inch that hold the tailpiece in place. These cost about 25 cents with their nuts. The bridge and the nut are 3D printed in my classroom. So because of that, they're practically free. I don't know what a cost for them would be. And finally, there is a set of strings that I get from Strings by Mail, and these come out to be about $2 per set. These are the tools that we use to build our cigar box ukuleles. The only power tool that we need is a drill, although in my classroom we use a laser cutter and a drill press for our hole cutting. We use a roofer square to draw in our fret lines. We use a small miter box along with a fretting saw to cut in the fret grooves. We use some end nippers that we use to cut off the frets. We need a small Phillips screwdriver. We also have a beveled file that we use to smooth off the frets. We have a fret hammer. The neck is shaped with a small hand plane that's a small rasp. We use fretting hammers. We use our famous Gorilla Glue to glue everything together. There's some fret wire. For clamps, we use squeeze clamps as well as rubber bands to glue stuff, to hold stuff while it's gluing together. To begin, the students need to decide how they want their ukulele body to look on the finished product. If they want to swirl dip their ukulele body, what they'll do is, using the program Inkscape, they'll use it to put just a few holes through the guitar body so the sound can resonate inside the ukulele body. However, if they want to make a fancy pattern using Inkscape, they can create products like this with using different laser settings. They can make beautiful scenes that will look really nice when cut out. If you don't have a laser machine at your school, that's fine. You can use a Forstner bit to cut out holes with a power drill to get your sound holes on your ukuleles. Once the student decides on the design for the body, it's time to start working on the neck. The neck is made out of a 22-inch piece of poplar that is 1.5 inches wide by 1/2 inch thick. The students will round off the poplar with a hand plane to make it a smooth surface. So what the kids do is from one end, they measure back 4¼ inches, make a little mark, and with a roofer's triangle, they will draw a straight line across there that's very faint. They'll turn the board around, they'll measure from the other end out 8½ inches, make a little mark, and again with a roofer's square, they will mark that off. And then they will use the rasp to round off the edge. After the neck has been roughed in, the students are going to probably ask for sandpaper. Tell them no, that will come later. You want to have them shape up to the edge of the other side, but not go over, because we want it to be exactly 1.5 inches wide to match up with the width of the fretboard. Have the kids hold the neck in their hand so that tell them to have it feel good in their hand, because this part up here is where you're going to be handling it the most. And once their neck is basically a semicircle, it's time to move on to the fretboard. The fretboard is made out of a 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch piece of oak that is 9.5 inches long. The frets are measured by hand using a nice ruler. Make sure the students measure all of the fret spacings from the end, not between frets. This way any errors that happen won't propagate through the fretboard, so it will end up with a nicer sounding ukulele. So we mark in the fret positions for a standard 13.5 inch soprano ukulele, and they go at 19.25 millimeters, 37.4, 54.57, 70.76, 86.04, 100.46, and 114.07. This is 7 frets, which is less than a standard ukulele has, but most people only use the top 3 frets anyways, so we don't put frets all the way down the neck board. All right, after we have these marked in, we take a carpenter square and draw lines to show where the frets go. I emphasize as we do this that where the frets go on this board is what makes your ukulele sound good or not, so I encourage lots of precision in their measurements, and I encourage students to compare their measurements against ukuleles in the classroom so that they're sure they got them right. To cut a fret groove, I start by using a small miter box. I put a piece of 1/8 inch scrap wood in the bottom of the miter box. We put the marked up fretboard inside the miter box, making sure that the pencil mark is in line with the straight across groove on the miter box. We'll use another scrap piece of wood to hold that in place, and then with a squeeze clamp, we clamp it all down. You want to make sure that the wood is tight against one edge of the miter box, otherwise it will cut crooked fret grooves. The fret slots are cut with the Stewie Mac fret saw. It's got a 020 kerf, and because of the way the saw is built, this little metal ridge comes to rest on top of the miter box when the fret is deep enough and stops cutting. That horrible screeching sound says you've gone far enough. All right, once all the slots have been sawn into the fretboard, there'll be 7 in all. They go about halfway through. It's time to install the frets. We use medium nickel fret wire that comes from cbgiddy.com. A pound is enough to do about 100 ukuleles, and it costs about $60. All right, so to put in a fret, first of all, we measure off a piece of fret wire that's about 1/4 inch longer on each side than the fretboard. And then the way I like to do it is I push the fret in on one side, and then I gently tap across. Gently tap across. When fretting, you want to be real careful not to go over the edge of the fretboard because it bends the fret and makes it not set flat. A couple more taps. Use your fingernail of your pinky to make sure it doesn't slide underneath the fret. That'll be tight enough. And then make sure your students wear safety glasses. Hold the end nippers at about a 30-degree angle and pinch off the ends that hang over. All right, and then repeat that for the rest of the frets. With the fretboard done, it's time to put in holes for where the tuning machines will go. What I like to do is I make little marking templates for the kids to use. They can measure them themselves. Basically, you measure down 1 inch from one end, 2 1/4 inches from the other end, and then in 3/8 and in 3/8, and that's where the tuning machines go. So I'll mark those with my template. And then you can drill these holes out with a hand drill with a 5/16 drill bit, or use a drill press. In my class, we use a drill press. So we've got the holes drilled for the tuning machines. We've got all the frets installed. We use a spacer in between the fretboard and the neck to allow for the finished neck to slide into a slot we're going to cut on the cigar box. As you put this together, it's really important to make sure that the fretboard is not behind this spacer. If it does, the nut doesn't set right. So it's really important to make sure that these are perfectly lined up. All right, so to install this, what I like to do is I put a good amount of glue on both sides of this spacer board, and I feather it out to the edges on both sides. So you pull the glue out to the edges with your finger on both sides. By getting glue out to both, all the way out to the edges, we get really nice glue joints, so we don't have any gaps when we pull the clamps off. All right, so I got glue on both sides. We find the 4 1/4 inch mark we made earlier. We line that up. Set it down, give it a little push. Take the fretboard, that goes directly on top. Again, keeping in mind that we want to make sure the fretboard is not behind the spacer. Give that a good little push. We're going to use some rubber bands as clamps to make a good, nice, tight joint everywhere. I'm going to clamp this down. All right, making sure everything is lined up exactly how we want it. Take a rubber band, stretch it over twice. That'll tie it in place. Make sure that everything is lined up exactly where you want it to be. And then you can wrap your way down the neck. I use 2 rubber bands. I find one goes each direction. Always check to make sure that the fretboard is not in front of or behind the spacer. We'll do this again from the other end. Give it a good wrap. Wrap again. Pull it tight. Work your way back. These stretched rubber bands provide really even tension across this whole surface, which makes for really, really nice glue joints. I'm going to pay close attention at the nut end, make it really tight. Wrap this under. And this is good to go until tomorrow. After the glue has dried overnight, the next morning you can remove the rubber bands to check your glue joint. You can see glue's coming out over here and over here. And now using a cabinet scraper, we're going to remove all of this extra glue. We're going to finish smoothing this off, and then we're going to sand it. Clamp the neck assembly to the bench, and with the cabinet scraper we pull towards us, and we can scrape off all this extra glue. We can smooth off any edges that might not be perfect, and then once it is nice and rounded, we'll start sanding it and call it good. Okay, so the neck is now ready. It's been smoothed and sanded. Now it's time to start putting the box together. So the first thing we do is we use a small Phillips screwdriver to remove the hinges from the lid of the box. We cut some holes in the box either with a Forstner bit or a laser cutter. This could be hydro dipped. You could do whatever you want with it to make it look as nice as you want. And then we need to cut out a notch for the neck to slide into. So from one side we measure in 3 1/4 inches, and from the same side we measure in 4 3/4 inches, which will allow for the passage of the neck board to slide through. We saw that out with a dovetail saw. Then you can pop the piece out by a quick pull. If there's any material left in the bottom, you can remove it with a chisel. Alright, with the notch cut out, we can now do a test fit of our neck and our ukulele body. This slides in here like this. It's coming together. So what we do now is we flip it over. You can see now why we don't put any holes in the middle. Use a roofer's square to make sure that the neck and box are at right angles to each other. And then with a pencil, make a mark on both sides of the board that runs through the neck. So we've got that. Then we're going to apply 2 nice beads of wood glue in here. Also add a little drop back here to hold the base of the neck in place. Then we're going to take the neck assembly and we're going to slide that in carefully. Push it back and forth a little bit. And to hold all of this in place, what we do is we get a couple of scraps of wood, put one on the front, in front of the fretboard, that will allow you to get a nice clamp surface. If you clamp straight on the fretboard, we don't get good adhesion between the lid of the box and the fret and the fretboard. So here, I just do this gently to begin with. So I put this clamp on here, come to the back, put on another clamp with a piece of scrap wood underneath so we don't mar the surface. Push it back, put the clamp on, have it bite over the box so that it makes a nice tight fit. And then check one more time up at the top to make sure that the neck is at right angles. If it's not, you can loosen the clamp just a little bit. After the glue is dried overnight, we can take off the clamps and get ready to install the tailpiece. At this point, it's starting to look like a musical instrument. We get kind of excited. The tailpiece is made out of 5/8 inch dowel. It's a piece that's 2 inches long. 4 holes are drilled 3/8 of an inch apart for the strings to go through. Rotate at 90 degrees. And those are 2 holes that are in between the 3/8 inch holes. That's a 1/8 inch hole that we're going to use to install the tailpiece. All right. To find a location for the tailpiece, the ukulele is a standard 13.5 inch scale length. So measuring from the top of the fretboard to 13.5. That's where the bridge will go. We're going to run back 2 more inches to 15.5 inches for where we install the tailpiece. So measuring back 15.5 inches, I'm going to make a light mark on the ukulele box. This mark will be covered when we install the tailpiece. Now to get proper position, we want to make sure that the holes for the strings are in line with the neck. When kids do this, the necks sometimes get a little bit crooked. So what we do is we hold a meter stick against the neck. We bring our tailpiece back to the mark we measured, and we make sure that the holes line up with the neck. Rotate it about 1/4 of a turn. It's now over the mark that we made. I use a nail. I poke that through the hole. Push pretty hard. Leave the nail in the hole that we just chose because they're not always exactly balanced. And then we're going to drill an 1/8 inch hole through the mark that was just made with the nail. Excellent. And then to install the tailpiece, we're going to leave the nail in there still. We're going to put a drop of glue in between the 2 1/8 inch holes. We're going to take the nail out. We're going to take one of the small 1¼ inch bolts that we have from before. We're going to push that through the hole that the nail was in. That's going to go through the hole we just drilled. We're going to install the nut back here. And at this point we're just going to make it finger tight. I'm going to come back over here, make sure that the tailpiece is square to the neck and body. I'm going to hold that, and then we drill through the second hole. And without moving anything, we'll put the bolt through, blow off the sawdust, put on the nut, and tighten them up with a wrench and a screwdriver. Alright, so now it's time to add the tuning hardware. To begin, there are these little plastic grommets that go on the front side of the ukulele. The hole that was drilled earlier should allow them to push in with just your thumb, but if they don't slide in easily, you can take a piece of wood and just give it a little tap to protect it, and that'll get it down flush. These are plastic, so you don't want to hit them straight on with a hammer. Alright, and then to install the tuners, we're going to turn it over. And you can start with any tuner you like. I'll start with this one. So they go in with the point towards the center and pointing towards the base of the ukulele. The way I like to put these in is I put a tuner in place, take a pencil that's dull, and I poke it through one of the holes and push. Use it kind of like an awl. Then I will take that tuner out. I'll take a 1/16 inch drill bit and I'll drill the hole. Being careful not to go all the way through. Reinstall the tuner. Put that screw in. I always do this one hole at a time so as not to have anything get offline. Some people are braver than myself and will drill all the holes out at once, but I find by doing this one hole at a time, put this screw in, and then go up here and drill through the tuner hole, things line up better all the time. Again, being careful not to go all the way through. Put the screw in, and then repeat this for the other 3 tuners. We are nearing the end and it's time to glue the box shut. So we're going to take the top part away. We're going to add a thin bead of glue all the way around the interior of the box. And it's a really thin bead. Don't want it to come out the edge. And we carefully align the top to the bottom. Give it a little squeeze. And you want to protect the wood with some cardboard or scraps of wood before you clamp it shut. So we don't want to mark the top or the bottom. And then with the squeeze clamp, we clamp it shut. And you want to clamp this right on the edge so that it puts all the pressure on the periphery of the box and not on the inside. Apply about 6 clamps all together and let it dry overnight. So the box is glued overnight, so it's time to take the clamps off. And now we can put on the strings. One thing that's a little bit different about this ukulele is the way the strings wrap. Normally all the strings come up the fretboard, they come through the center of the tuning machines and wrap around from the inside. Because of the design of this, with the neck not pointing back at the head, we wrap a little bit differently. So strings 1 and 4 wrap around the outside of the posts, strings 2 and 3 wrap around the inside of the posts. This is a little different, bothers some people, but you can still tune this up real well. So I use strings from Strings by Mail. I 3D print my nut and bridge. I put these on after the strings are on. It makes it a little bit easier to get everything in place. So I'm going to put the strings on and then tune it up. So here the strings are on. Up here you can see that strings 1 and 4 wrap around the outside of the post and strings 2 and 3 wrap around the inside of the post. To install the nut, we put it in like this, and it just stands up and the strings will pop into place. To install the bridge, we measure back exactly 13.5 inches and we slide the nut into place. So we can stand the bridge up, measure back 13.5 inches, and that's where it goes. And now we start the process of tuning the ukulele, which takes a long time for it to stay in tune. The strings stretch and seat back here, so it takes a long time for it to keep in tune. But in a week or so, it'll sound perfect. So here we are. We've gone from a few sticks and a box to a nice looking, nice sounding instrument. It takes a motivated student about 3 weeks of 1 hour class sessions. Less motivated take about 4 weeks. So I just thought I'd show you what it sounds like when it's done. So they sound nice. Kids are proud of them when they're done with these. So if you have any questions, my email will pop up on the next screen, and followed by that will be a bunch of images of ukuleles that students have made in the past. I'd love to hear from you, and let me know how it works. Thanks.